She held my hands at the altar, smiled, and said, "I do," but it felt like a lie even then. I told myself I was just nervous, that the way she glanced at him in the crowd didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to believe it, not on my wedding day. I'm a 28-year-old man, and my 49-year-old stepmother fancies herself a party planner. Since marrying my dad, she has insisted on organizing and hosting every family gathering on his side. Growing up, I never particularly enjoyed these events because she's very controlling and doesn't handle criticism well, but I played along for my dad's sake, as he believes it helps her feel included. I'm set to marry my fiancée, Jane, 26F, this July. We originally got engaged in early 2021, but when Jane became pregnant a few months later, we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son. As a result, we've had a long engagement. From the very beginning, my stepmother has tried to take over our wedding planning, complaining, contacting our planner, and even showing up uninvited to Jane's dress appointments. Despite repeatedly asking her to stop, she refuses to back off. My dad wants us to appease her, but it's clear she's bitter about not being in charge of the wedding or being given the title of Mother of the Groom on the invitations. Besides our son, we also care for Luke, Jane's 4-year-old paternal half-brother. Jane gained custody of him early in our relationship after his parents passed away. I moved in with them during the pandemic and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. While he doesn't call me Dad, instead referring to Jane as his sister and me as his OP, we love him as our own. However, my stepmother despises Luke. She's accused Jane of baby-trapping her way into the family, an accusation that only intensified after our son was born. While my dad gets along well with Jane and adores both kids, my stepmother refuses to let him babysit Luke. Because of this, we rarely leave the kids with them and instead rely on Jane's brother and sister-in-law, whose children are close in age to ours. We had a thing last Sunday, and my BL was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mom and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place, and we left. When we returned, we found both kids in tears, my stepmother screaming, and my dad weakly trying to defuse the situation. Apparently, Luke had mentioned that he and our son would both be ring bearers at our wedding, which sent my stepmother into a rage. She exploded, declaring that she wouldn't allow it because Luke isn't family. Her reaction was so extreme that I had to include a trigger warning. Luke ended up crying so hard that his lip is still split. She had never gone this far before. In response, we immediately banned her from our home and our wedding. My dad was furious and insisted that if she wasn't welcome, he wouldn't attend either. To make matters worse, he downplayed what really happened, convincing half of his side of the family to boycott the wedding, including my stepbrother, who blindly sides with his mother despite my attempts to tell him the truth. Jane and I refuse to back down, though some of my cousins who have decided not to come are urging us to reconsider. Jane's family is fully on our side, but one of her aunts suggested that maybe my stepmother is lashing out because she feels unwelcome by my family. Honestly, I'm fed up with how my family keeps enabling her behavior. I love my dad and truly want him at my wedding, but I'm also prepared to go no contact if that's what it takes to protect my family. I think I accidentally deleted the part where I mentioned this, but we did press charges. The day after the incident, we took Luke to the pediatrician and gathered every bit of evidence we had. Along with photos of his injuries, we were incredibly lucky to have nanny cam footage. Some people correctly assumed that my stepmother wasn't actually invited to our house. She wasn't. However, since my dad rarely goes anywhere without her, we had taken precautions. While we never expected her to do something this horrific, we also never trusted her with the kids. The physical assault happened off camera, but the footage still captured her screaming and Luke crying both before and after the incident. She now has a child abuse charge on her record. There was no way we were going to let her get away with this. There's a lot more I want to add, and I'll try to respond to as many comments as I can. I did not expect this level of response. But for now, I just want to reassure everyone that Luke is okay. We took him to the pediatrician the day after, and since he already had a counselor because Jane was deeply affected by her father and stepmother's passing and worried it might impact him, he will continue his treatment. We've been giving him extra love and attention, and while he's still upset, he's already doing much better. As for our relationship with my dad and stepmother, Jane and I are officially going no contact. We haven't spoken to either of them since the incident, and I have no intention of reaching out. Any necessary communication is being handled by my younger sister, who fully supports us but has chosen to remain in low contact for now. I've decided to adopt Jane's approach when it comes to dealing with loved ones: forgive what is sincerely apologized for, but never forget. If my dad and stepmother ever truly acknowledge what they did and offer a genuine apology, we'll be willing to forgive them begrudgingly, perhaps, but we will never let them forget what they did to our family. Regardless, neither of them will ever be allowed near Luke, our baby, or any future children we may have, even if we do choose to forgive them. Regarding the rest of my family, I saw a lot of comments suggesting that I post pictures of Luke's injuries or share the nanny cam footage. While I understand the reasoning behind it, I'm not comfortable exposing my injured preschooler like that, especially since nothing truly disappears from the internet. I also chose not to share the photos with my family unless absolutely necessary. I should mention that while my family deeply respects my dad, they've never been particularly fond of my stepmother. Before marrying my father, she had already been through 2 failed marriages, the first of which resulted in my stepbrother and my dad actually cheated on his then-girlfriend to be with her. That girlfriend was well loved by my family, so from the start, my stepmother was disliked. Beyond that, she has always been controlling and manipulative, constantly trying to assert herself as the family matriarch. Her favorite way to do this was by taking over the planning of every family event, soaking up the attention and compliments that came with it. The main reason I hated these gatherings as a kid was because she always managed to make them about herself, even Christmas, as well as mine and my sister's birthdays. The rest of the family tolerated it, but they never truly liked her. Things were different with Luke. Most of my relatives didn't meet him until after COVID restrictions eased, by which point he was already 2 years old. He's a bright, lovable kid, and since there weren't many young children in the family, he quickly became the center of attention. My guess is that my stepmother resents how easily Jane and Luke were accepted compared to her, and that's why she harbors so much bitterness toward them, but of course, I can't say for sure. She was also mad that, aside from not being the planner, she would have absolutely no involvement in the wedding party. She tried to pressure us into letting her officiate. One of Jane's best friends was offered that role a year ago, making stepbrother my best man. He wasn't interested, and I'd already gotten my best friend, or asking her sister's daughter to be our flower girl. We promised Jane's 3-year-old niece. Also, her sister's daughter is 15 and doesn't know us. She also tried to convince us to let my dad walk Jane down the aisle, since her father's gone, but her eldest brother, the BIL I mentioned in the first post, had already been enlisted. SM was disappointed that my family wasn't as involved in the wedding as Jane's, and kept making comments about how that would never happen if we put her in charge. Regardless of the reason, there is absolutely no justification for treating a child so horribly, especially if it really does stem from petty jealousy, as I suspect. Since I haven't spoken to my father, my sister has been keeping me updated on his actions. According to her, my dad and stepmother have completely rewritten the story when talking to the rest of the family, leaving out Luke's injury and the abuse charges entirely. Instead, they're portraying it as though Jane and I banned them simply because we were annoyed with SM and took our frustration out on my dad as well. However, since most of our relatives already disliked SM, it wasn't difficult to set the record straight. The family members I actually wanted at the wedding have since apologized and are now calling out my dad for his behavior. As for those who refuse to believe us or claim we overreacted, they've been told they are no longer welcome in our home. Most of them are from my dad's generation, so I can't say I'm surprised. Still, it's disappointing to realize that they are so biased they'd rather defend a woman they dislike just to keep my dad happy even after she harmed a child. If anything, this has only reinforced my decision to cut them out of my life. My stepbrother is still in denial. Despite all the evidence, he refuses to believe his mother could hurt a child. While I can understand his struggle, I love my own mother too. That doesn't mean I can excuse his refusal to accept the truth. So, he's banned as well. It's unfortunate since we were close growing up, but I don't regret it. Besides, Jane has 3 other siblings in addition to Luke, an older brother, a twin brother, and a younger sister, and I already feel closer to them than I ever did to my stepbrother. Jane's family, on the other hand, has been incredibly supportive. They are outraged over what happened, and her maternal relatives have embraced Luke as their own ever since Jane took custody of him. They've been checking in frequently to make sure he's okay. With the money we saved from uninviting certain guests, we decided to help Jane's cousin who lives in another country by covering her travel expenses so she can attend the wedding. As for Luke, he's doing much better and is almost back to his usual cheerful self. His lip injury was shallow, it's healing slowly but didn't require stitches. A few days ago, we sat him down and explained that my dad and stepmother would no longer be in our lives. While he really liked my dad, he understands that my dad and Sam are inseparable. It's clear he's afraid of her, but we're doing everything we can to make him feel safe. Jane and I have reassured him that he is, without a doubt, part of our family. We love him, and nothing will ever change that. I'm not too worried about Dad or Sam trying to show up at the wedding, but we've alerted the venue and given them pictures just in case they try anything. Better safe than sorry. Some people brought attention to the fact that Sam is a hypocrite for saying Luke isn't family. I agree, for obvious reasons. Her main excuse for pretty much everything she does is that she doesn't feel like my family welcomes her. Dad has been guilting me to take part in everything she plans by reminding us of that for as long as I can remember. The way he continues to make excuses for her without realizing this is basically a case of the pot calling the kettle black, except Luke actually is family, is what has made me accept that, while I will always love my dad, it's not healthy or safe for me and my family to be around him anymore. It hurts to know my son won't have his only remaining bio-grandfather in his life, but he has two amazing step-grandpas to make up for it. For now, I'm sad, but satisfied with how things have turned out. I don't like to complain about my life. It's a mess, but a beautiful one. I love my fiancé, I love my kids, and I'm lucky enough to love my job. We're happy. I'm not letting anyone ruin that. To whoever was annoyed at my censorship, when posting on AITA didn't work out, Jane suggested I make the writing less explicit. I'm not used to Reddit yet, so I might have overdone it a little bit. I hadn't planned on sharing another update before the wedding, but something significant happened. The good news. We were granted the restraining order. The bad news. Jane and I had to face both my father and Sam in court. It was our first time seeing them since we kicked them out over a month ago, and neither of us were looking forward to it. Thankfully, we left the kids with Jane's brother and sister-in-law, so Luke didn't have to see them. The hearing itself was quicker than I expected. I'll give my father some credit, at least he was smart enough to realize they had no chance of winning. The evidence against them was overwhelming. We had the nanny cam footage, Luke's photos and medical records, and on top of that, my sister had compiled every text and email Sam had sent to her and the rest of the family about the incident. Since Sam avoids phone calls, there were a lot of messages. They didn't even bother hiring an attorney. The judge granted us a protection order against Sam, meaning she can't come within 500 feet of us or our property. We're changing all the locks this week, and I'm also considering changing my phone number. I have to say, walking out of that courthouse was the safest I've felt since this nightmare began. Jane was so relieved she was on the verge of happy tears when we got to the car. Afterward, we picked up the kids and went to McDonald's with her brother and his family to celebrate. Hours later, my father called me. The order doesn't extend to him, so he can still do that. Jane and the kids were in bed, so I answered. I didn't expect him to change his mind and apologize all of a sudden, but decided to give him one last chance. He attempted some awkward small talk, but I cut him off and told him to get to the point. He asked if the restraining order was really necessary. I made it clear Sam would never be allowed near Jane or my children again, and I was relieved to have a legal order to enforce that. Any excuse he made for Sam was easy to shut down. But she only hit him once. Once was more than enough. The kids need their grandma. She's not their grandma, Mom is. She's my wife. You need to respect her. She attacked Luke. She disrespected my family and my home. I owe her nothing, least of all respect. He then launched into a speech about family, how much of a blessing Sam was, and everything she had supposedly done for me and my sister over the years. In response, I listed every instance I could remember of her lying, crossing boundaries, or behaving irrationally toward me, my family, and my sister, covering both my childhood and adulthood. I reminded him of how she constantly tried to hijack major milestones, including our wedding plans, our son's birth, Jane's baby shower, and my sister's college graduation. I pointed out her obsession with maintaining a perfect family image and her outright cruel behavior toward Luke. I also brought up how she used to go through my sister's and my personal belongings when we were younger, a small thing compared to everything else, but a habit that continued until my sister finally moved out just 3 months ago. For example, we strongly suspect she found out about Jane's wedding dress appointments by snooping through my sister's planner while she wasn't home. Some of the memories I brought up were lengthy and difficult to explain, but they made one thing clear: SM means absolutely nothing to me. He tried using the same tired excuse about her not feeling included, but I cut him off. I told him he had a chance to protect his grandchildren, yet he chose his monstrous wife instead. That alone was enough for me to want nothing to do with him. I ended the call without a goodbye. Later, my sister told me he called her as well. She made it clear she was going no contact with him, too. At this point, I think we're both coming to terms with the fact that our father isn't going to change. It's disappointing, but he's made his priorities clear and his children and grandchildren aren't one of them. That's all for now. Since these memories are still fresh in my mind, I might share some of the stories I reminded him of, but that will take some time. Until then, as always, best wishes to all of you.